we can often gauge how well people are comprehending text or how efficiently they're comprehending text based on their gazing time. So, for instance, as I look at this lengthy sentence that appeared, I believe they said in Newsweek magazine back when we used to have news magazines, and you can see this gauges eye fixations of a college student reading a scientific passage. Gazes within each sentence are sequentially numbered, and above the fixated words with the durations in milliseconds indicated below the sequence number. So, for instance, and the number that you see above the word is the number of milliseconds that the person lingered on the word. So with flywheels, that's 1.5 seconds, or roughly 1,500 milliseconds. Flywheels are one of the oldest mechanical devices known to man, or we'd say known to people now. Every internal combustion engine contains a small flywheel, and you can see that even on the second mentioned, they lingered on flywheel that converts the jerky motion of the pistons into the smooth flow of energy that powers the drive shaft. So on words that we know, like are, one, of the, oldest, then there's mechanical, which is less common. Devices maybe is less common. Combustion, internal combustion engine, all of those words cost a little bit more time. But phrases like of the, you can see they only spent a very short term, a short amount of time on that, whatever that is, less than 100 milliseconds or less than 1/10 of a second. On the other hand, flywheels, they lingered on it for a full 1.5 seconds, suggesting that things that are a little bit more involved require more gazing time, and the phrase of the, or of the in this case, would be processed nearly instantaneously, where 83 is just a tiny fraction of the 1,000 milliseconds, which is kind of a cool idea. Was it 5/60th, whatever? There's a 1/12. That's what I was trying to get at. It's 1/12 of a second. Very, very little time at all. But even the flywheel, the second time it's presented, you're trying to infer what it is, kind of. I don't exactly know what a flywheel is as I'm reading this. But even on the second presentation there, it took a whole second to get past it. Whereas other words that we fly through, like the and of, etc., which is kind of plausible. We would expect that to be the case. And by the way, these are measured on things like called saccades or saccades, SACCADES, in which we can observe the amount of time that the pupil fixates on one passage of text, and the longer that they fixate, we can infer that the word is more involved and takes more effort to comprehend or even pronounce, is the idea. So now this may rely to some degree on a given news strategy. Your text describes this as, and I want to read her phrasing here, Haviland and Clark described what they called a given news strategy, a practical approach to processing sentences whereby listeners and readers divide sentences into two parts, the given and the new. The given part of the sentence contains information that's familiar from the context, the preceding information, etc. The new part, as the term implies, contains unfamiliar information. Listeners first search memory for information corresponding to the given information and then update memory by incorporating the new information. So I'm always taking a sentence and say, hey, what do I already know and what can I spot weld on based on new reading experience here. Now, it also relies on bridging inferences. Take sentence 25, how direct it is. We got some beer out of the car. The beer was warm. That's very direct. But 26 involves an inference. We checked the picnic supplies. The beer was warm. I must infer that among the picnic supplies was beer. Of course, there's no other way to interpret that sentence. So that's the idea. I have to make a bridging inference to be able to understand that. Now, another thing that's interesting is that an ambiguous story can show the role of context. So imagine reading this passage without the illustration next to it. Hope I can fit this all on one page. Sorry. This is a very clever study by Bransford and Johnson, 1972. And here goes. If the balloons popped, the sound wouldn't be able to carry since everything would be too far away from the correct floor. A closed window would also prevent the sound from carrying, since most buildings tend to be well insulated. Since the whole operation depends on a steady flow of electricity, a break in the middle of the wire would also cause problems. Of course, the fellow could shout, but the human voice is not loud enough to carry that far. An additional problem is that the string could break on the instrument. Then there could be no accompaniment to the message. It's clearly the best situation would involve less distance. Then there would be fewer potential problems. With face-to-face contact, the least number of things could go wrong. As you can see, what he's doing here is serenading his would-be romantic partner with an amplifier of sorts that's being suspended by balloons. So if I did not have that illustration, of course, I could scarcely comprehend this sentence. And that's the idea. I need to have some kind of context that enables me to remember it. And once I have that context, I can remember 80% of this in a week. No problem. But without context, I have trouble memorizing it. Another example that I give is one doing laundry. And you phrase things rather ambiguously on purpose. So at first, items must be separated into two major types, which would be lights and darks. You can only use one machine at a time, etc. I could lay out all the parameters for doing laundry, including adding the soap, etc. But if I phrase those things ambiguously and I don't mention laundry, then in that case it's much harder to remember later. So context obviously aids us in remembering a story.